When Keanu Reeves stepped onto the set of the Steve Harvey show, the audience leaned in, expecting charm, laughter, maybe a Hollywood tale or two. But then his eyes caught the small cross around Steve's neck, and everything shifted. He paused mid-sentence. What he said next didn't just silence the room, it echoed far beyond it, into lives he never even knew he touched. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below, we're about to begin. Welcome to Motivation for Success, where quiet moments ignite the loudest transformations. What if one simple sentence, spoken on live television, wasn't just heartfelt, but life-saving? And what if the man who heard it carried that moment like a torch, lighting the way for thousands more? This is a story about humility, about legacy, and the invisible ways we rescue one another, without even realizing it. Stay with us. The lights rose gently on the set of the Steve Harvey show. The audience buzzed with anticipation, a palpable electricity filling the room, not because a comedian was about to perform, but because Keanu Reeves was the guest, his presence alone creating an atmosphere of reverent excitement. The studio hummed with whispered conversations and the occasional burst of laughter as people settled into their seats, phones ready to capture any moment worth sharing with friends who wouldn't believe they had breathed the same air as the beloved actor. Camera operators adjusted their equipment, producers whispered last-minute instructions into headsets, and the floor manager signaled for quiet as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1, and they were live, the energy in the room shifting from anticipation to focused attention. Steve stepped forward in his impeccably tailored blue-gray suit, the cross necklace catching the studio lights as it rested against his chest, shining faintly beneath his collar. His confident stride and warm smile immediately commanded the room, his presence filling the space with the charisma that had made him a household name. "We've got a man today who needs no intro, but deserves one," he announced, his voice carrying both authority and genuine admiration. "Mr. John Wick himself, Keanu Reeves." The words resonated through the studio, bouncing off walls and settling into the hearts of every person present, creating a moment of collective excitement. Thunderous applause cascaded through the studio as Keanu walked out with his usual quiet grace, a quality that had become as recognizable as his face. The sound swelled like a wave, crashing against the ceiling and washing over the actor as he emerged from backstage. His dark blazer and crisp black shirt created a striking contrast against the vibrant set, that shy half-smile playing across his features as he moved. There was something in his demeanor that spoke of humility despite his status, a groundedness that seemed rare in the world of Hollywood glamour. He extended his hand, shaking Steve's firmly, before settling into his seat with the casual elegance that had become his trademark. His posture was relaxed yet respectful, acknowledging both the formality of the occasion and the informal connection he hoped to establish with the audience. Steve chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he looked Keanu up and down with good-natured assessment. "I thought you'd be taller, man," he quipped, breaking the ice with the ease of someone who had spent decades learning how to make people comfortable. Waves of laughter rippled through the audience. Keanu's smile deepened, revealing a glimpse of the warmth beneath his reserved exterior. There was no offense taken, only appreciation for the moment of levity. "Most of the dangerous parts one play come from inside," he replied, tapping his chest lightly, suggesting a depth that transcended physical presence. His voice carried a gentle philosophy in those few words, hinting at the thoughtfulness that had made him more than just another action star. Steve grinned, recognizing the substance behind the simple statement. "We all got some of that inside," he affirmed, a momentary bridge forming between their different worlds. In that brief exchange, the two men, seemingly from different planets in the entertainment universe, found common ground, acknowledging the universal human experience that connected them despite their different paths. The conversation flowed naturally at first: movies, motorcycles, martial arts. Keanu answered questions with his characteristic thoughtfulness, choosing words carefully, present in each moment. He spoke about his latest film project with passion but without ego, describing the physical training required with a respect for the stunt performers who had guided him. He mentioned his love for motorcycles not as status symbols but as machines that offered freedom and connection to the road. There was an authenticity to his responses that made the audience lean in further, sensing they were getting a glimpse of the man behind the carefully maintained public image. As Steve guided the conversation with the skill of a veteran host, something unexpected happened. Almost imperceptibly, Keanu's gaze flickered to the small crucifix adorning Steve's neck. The moment might have passed unnoticed by many, but the cameras caught it, that fraction of a second when the actor's attention shifted from the conversation to the symbol of faith resting against the comedian's collar. Something changed in Keanu's expression, a softening, a recognition perhaps, that altered the energy between them. He paused, the silence stretching just long enough to be noticeable. The audience sensed the shift, the atmosphere in the studio transforming from entertainment to something more profound. Steve, Keanu's voice softened, the timbre changing to something barely above a whisper, intimate despite the crowded studio. His eyes, usually guarded when speaking about personal matters, revealed vulnerability rarely witnessed by the public. "Can I share something I've never said on television before?" The shift was unmistakable. Steve's animated expression transformed into something more attentive, sensing the gravity that had suddenly entered their exchange. The entertainer who had mastered the art of the punchline set aside his practiced persona, becoming entirely present to whatever was about to unfold. He leaned forward, the entertainer giving way to the human being, recognizing that they had crossed into territory beyond the typical celebrity interview. "Brother, you can say anything here," he assured, his tone conveying not just permission but a sacred space of trust. Keanu turned briefly to the audience, acknowledging their presence in this unexpected moment, then back to Steve, his eyes reflecting vulnerability rarely seen from the intensely private actor. The studio lights seemed to soften around them, creating an island of connection amid the technical apparatus of television production. "Years ago, I was at a really dark place," he began, each word carrying the weight of memory. "My career looked fine on the outside. But I wasn't okay inside. I had just lost someone I loved deeply. I didn't want to go on." The admission hung in the air, stark and honest, from a man who had guarded his private pain from public consumption for decades. The room fell silent. Not even a cough disturbed the sacred space that had unexpectedly opened between them all. The collective breath held by hundreds hung suspended in the studio air. Production assistants stood motionless, cameramen remained fixed on their shots, even the usual shuffling of the audience ceased. Time itself seemed to pause in recognition of the truth being spoken. One night, Keanu continued, each word measured and meaningful, his gaze never leaving Steve's face. "I was flipping through channels, not expecting anything. Not looking for answers or comfort, just trying to fill the silence of an empty house. Then I saw a rerun of this show." His hand gestured slightly, encompassing the studio around them. "You were talking about failure, about God not being done with us. And you said, if you're still breathing, God's not done with you." The quote hung between them, a bridge connecting two strangers who had unknowingly shared a profound moment years earlier. Steve's hand moved to his cross instinctively, fingers brushing against the symbol that had become more than mere jewelry, a physical representation of the faith that had carried him through his own valleys. His eyes widened slightly, recognition dawning of the weight his casual words had carried to places he never imagined they would reach. "That sentence," Keanu said, his gaze unwavering, connecting directly with Steve's. The studio lights reflected in his eyes, which had grown damp with emotion carefully contained. "It didn't save my career. It saved my life." 6 simple words that transformed the interview from entertainment to testimony, from performance to revelation. Steve blinked hard, emotion rising unbidden to the surface, his lips trembling slightly with the weight of this unexpected revelation. The man known for his vibrant personality and ready laugh was momentarily speechless, touched by the knowledge that words spoken on an ordinary day had reached across time and circumstance to rescue someone in their darkest hour. Have you ever heard a line on TV that felt like it was meant just for you? Type yes if it's ever happened to you, or share what that line was. I thought you were just being funny, Steve whispered, his usual confident voice stripped to its essential humanity. There was wonder in his tone, the realization that purpose often works through us in ways we never anticipate. You weren't, Keanu replied simply, the truth laying bare between them. No embellishment was needed to underscore the significance. You were being real. And that realness became my rescue. In that exchange, the artificial boundary between celebrity and host, between entertainer and audience, dissolved into something more authentic, human beings acknowledging the profound impact we have upon one another, often without knowing. Keanu leaned forward, closing the physical distance between them as he had already bridged the emotional one. The movement was subtle but deliberate, inviting Steve deeper into the story that connected them. I didn't want to be seen after that, he continued, his voice gathering strength even as it remained intimate. I wanted to do something, not as an actor, but as a human being who had been given a second chance. So, I started a quiet fund. We help people who've hit bottom. Single moms struggling to feed their families. Veterans sleeping in their cars. Former foster kids who age out of the system with nowhere to go. No PR. No press releases. Just help when it matters most. The simplicity of the description belied what must have been years of careful work, resources channeled quietly to places of greatest need. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, the physical evidence of transformation carried close to his heart. The paper had clearly been handled many times, folded and unfolded, a tangible reminder of purpose found in darkness. This, he handed it to Steve, the paper passing between them like a sacred artifact, is a printout of a scholarship letter a girl received last month. She thinks it came from a church outreach program. It didn't. It came from that night when I heard your words. From the decision those words inspired. From the realization that sometimes our rescue becomes someone else's. Steve took the paper with reverence, his fingers slightly trembling as they closed around the edges. His eyes moved across the text, reading silently, absorbing the reality of impact that had originated from words he barely remembered speaking. Then, overcome by the magnitude of connection, he lowered his head into his hands, the weight of unexpected impact momentarily overwhelming him. This wasn't the practiced emotion of television, but the genuine response of a man confronting the ripple effects of his existence. You've got me choked up, man, he muttered, the admission raw and honest. No attempt to maintain the polished veneer of entertainment, just authentic human feeling breaking through. And there's more, Keanu said, his voice gentle but clear, carrying easily through the hushed studio. She's here today. A woman in her late 20s stood up in the audience. Dressed modestly but with quiet dignity in a simple blue dress and cardigan, her presence contrasted with the typical showiness of television audiences. Tears glistened in her eyes, catching the studio lights as she stepped forward from her seat. Around her, other audience members turned, watching as she began her journey toward the stage. The path from her seat seemed symbolic of a longer journey, from despair to hope, from invisibility to purpose, from recipient to contributor. As she walked, the cameras following her movement, the studio remained in reverent silence. No producer prompted applause, no music swelled to signal an emotional moment. Just quiet respect for the living testimony making her way to the center of the story. When she reached the stage, a production assistant helped her up the steps, and she stood between the two men whose lives had intersected with hers in ways none of them could have foreseen. I don't know if you remember me, Mr. Harvey, she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. Her hands clasped in front of her, composure maintained through what must have been overwhelming circumstances. But my mom once called into your radio show when I was little. We were living in a shelter at the time, and she was losing hope. You told her not to give up, that sometimes the darkest hour comes right before the breakthrough. And now. She paused, gathering herself. I work in community outreach for families facing homelessness. Because of that scholarship. She turned to Keanu. Because of this man's generosity. Her gaze returned to Steve. And ultimately, because of you and the words you spoke on a day when you had no idea who might be listening. Steve looked between them, the actor and the woman, two souls connected by his words, spoken on a day when he had no idea who might be listening or what seeds might be planted. The enormity of it registered on his face, the realization that our most significant impacts often occur when we least expect them. His lips quivered with the recognition of a legacy he hadn't known he was building. I truly don't know what to say right now, he admitted, the usually eloquent host momentarily wordless in the face of such profound connection. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder, the contact grounding and sincere, offering support in a moment of overwhelming emotion. You already said it, he reminded him gently. Years ago. When you thought no one important was listening. The irony hung in the air, that words delivered to an invisible audience had reached precisely the person who needed them most. Steve turned to the audience, his professional composure transformed by authentic emotion, making his voice crack at the edges. Y'all ever say something and think it disappeared? He asked, the question rhetorical yet deeply felt. Ever throw words out into the world and wonder if they landed anywhere that mattered? Nods rippled through the crowd. Murmurs of recognition and understanding rose and fell like a gentle tide. People connected with the universal experience of wondering if our words, our efforts, our lives make any difference at all. Turns out, Steve continued, finding his footing again, a smile breaking through the emotion, God kept the receipt. The metaphor, simple yet profound, captured perfectly the discovery that nothing offered in sincerity is ever truly lost. The room laughed gently through tears, release and recognition flowing together, tension breaking into something beautiful. The communal response acknowledged the truth they were witnessing, that connections exist beneath the surface of our lives, invisible threads binding impact to intention in ways we rarely get to see. I want us to do something, Keanu said, rising to his feet, embodying the words with action. There was purpose in his movement, a decisive step from conversation to demonstration. I want us to stand. Not for me. Not for celebrity. But for everyone out there who thinks they don't matter. For every soul standing on the edge, waiting for a sign that they should stay. He reached out his hand toward Steve, an invitation to join him in the symbolic gesture. Steve took it without hesitation, rising to join him, their clasped hands a picture of connection across different worlds, different experiences, unified in the recognition of shared humanity. Without instruction, without prompt cards or producer signals, the entire audience stood in unison. The movement rippled from front row to back, a visible wave of solidarity. In silence. No cheering. No applause seeking to insert itself into a moment worthy of reverence. Just the quiet power of human beings acknowledging something profound passing between them, the recognition that we are all connected in ways we cannot see, that our words and actions create ripples that travel to shores we may never visit. This, Keanu said, gesturing to the standing witnesses with his free hand, is what healing looks like. The observation was delivered not with dramatic emphasis but with quiet certainty, the knowledge of someone who had walked through dark valleys and emerged to find purpose on the other side. Steve nodded, finding his voice again, drawing strength from the moment they had created together. This is what legacy sounds like, he added, understanding that true impact isn't measured in ratings or awards or even applause, but in lives touched and directions changed. They stood together, the comedian who had risen from homelessness to become a household name, the actor whose private pain had remained largely hidden beneath his public persona, and the woman who represented countless others whose lives had been transformed by words spoken and actions taken. A living testament to the invisible ways humans rescue one another, often without realizing it. As the moment extended, Steve touched the cross at his neck again, this time deliberately, acknowledging its significance with new understanding. "I've worn this for years, many years," he said softly. "But I never knew someone would trace it back to hope." That cross, the same one that caught Keanu's eye, became more than jewelry that day. It became the thread that stitched 3 lives together. The symbol had been personal to him, a reminder of his own faith journey, but now he saw it differently, as a beacon that had caught the attention of someone drowning in darkness. Keanu looked at him, eyes gentle with understanding born of shared experience. "That's the thing about light, isn't it?" he reflected. "You don't need to be loud to illuminate a room. You just need to be real." The observation carried the weight of someone who had spent decades in an industry built on illusion yet had found his greatest purpose in authenticity. The two men embraced then, not the brief, performative hug of television, but the genuine embrace of two souls who had unexpectedly found meaningful connection. Arms wrapped fully around each other, a moment held long enough to acknowledge its significance. The young woman joined them, their circle widening to include her, completing a visual representation of impact passing from one life to another in an unbroken chain. As they separated, Steve wiped at his eyes unashamedly, no longer concerned with maintaining the polished image of entertainment. This moment had transcended performance, becoming something real and raw and significant. "You know," he said, finding his professional voice again but infused now with renewed purpose, "we come out here every day. We tell jokes. We interview guests. We try to entertain. And sometimes we forget that words have power beyond what we intend." Keanu nodded in agreement. "We never know who's listening," he added. "We never know who needs exactly what we have to offer at exactly the right moment." The young woman spoke up, her voice stronger now, confidence growing in the safety of the moment they had created together. "Sometimes those words save lives," she affirmed. "They certainly changed the direction of mine." As the show prepared to transition, Steve made one final observation. "The beautiful thing is," he said, gesturing to include everyone present, "this happens every day, all around us. People saving each other with words, with small kindnesses, with believing in someone when they've stopped believing in themselves. We just don't always get to see the results." Keanu smiled that gentle half-smile again, the expression reaching his eyes. "Maybe that's the real lesson here," he suggested. "Keep shining your light, even when you can't see where it lands. Someone, somewhere, is finding their way home because of it." The audience rose in applause then, not the obligatory applause of a television taping, but the genuine response to something authentic they had witnessed and become part of. It swelled from appreciation to standing ovation, acknowledging not celebrity status but human connection. The three embraced once more, not for the cameras now, but for themselves. A moment of genuine human connection in a world that often values spectacle over substance. As the studio lights dimmed slightly, signaling a commercial break, Steve turned to Keanu. "Thank you," he said simply, no elaboration needed between them now. "No," Keanu replied, "thank you. For words that mattered when it mattered most." The young woman nodded in agreement. "Sometimes we think hope needs to be complicated," she observed. "But often it's just the right words at the right time." As the audience settled back into their seats, the energy in the studio had transformed. This wasn't just another celebrity interview, another entertainment segment. Something authentic had transpired, a moment of genuine connection that transcended the typical boundaries of television. Phones had been lowered, social media updates forgotten, as people became fully present to the unfolding story of impact and transformation before them. When the cameras resumed rolling, the conversation continued, but with a different quality. The usual questions about upcoming projects and Hollywood gossip seemed less important now. Instead, Steve guided them toward deeper territory, discussing the invisible impacts we have on each other, the ways small kindnesses ripple outward, the importance of authentic presence in a world often dominated by performance. I've been in this business a long time, Steve reflected, and I've learned that the most powerful moments aren't scripted. They happen when we drop the act and just show up as ourselves. Keanu nodded in agreement. The characters I play are fictional, he said, but the connections we make with each other, those are real. Those are what matter when everything else falls away. The young woman, initially overwhelmed by the spotlight, found her voice growing stronger as she shared her story. I remember watching you on TV when I was young, she told Steve. My mom would turn on your show on our worst days, just to hear someone laughing. To be reminded that joy was still possible. Steve's eyes glistened again. See, that's what gets me, he admitted. We think we're just entertaining, just filling time. But for someone out there, we're providing something essential. A lifeline. A reminder. As the hour drew to a close, there was a palpable sense that something significant had transpired, not just for the three central figures, but for everyone present. The typical boundaries between performer and audience, between celebrity and fan, had dissolved into something more fundamental, human beings acknowledging their profound impact on one another. Before we wrap up, Steve said, I want to ask you both, what do you hope people take from this unexpected moment we've shared today? The young woman spoke first. I hope people realize that you never know who needs your words, she said. Something you say casually might be exactly what someone else has been desperate to hear. Keanu considered the question carefully, in his characteristic thoughtful manner. I hope people understand that our darkest moments don't define us, he finally said. They're just chapters in a longer story. And sometimes, the most important character in your story is someone who has no idea they've even entered the narrative. Steve nodded, absorbing their wisdom. And I hope, he added, that everyone watching remembers that we're all just walking each other home. Sometimes leading, sometimes following, but always connected in ways we can't even see. As the credits prepared to roll, Steve made one final comment. You know what strikes me about all this, he said. We spend so much time trying to make big impacts, trying to change the world in grand ways. But it's often the small things, a kind word, a moment of authenticity, a simple truth spoken without pretense, that actually transforms lives. Keanu smiled that gentle half-smile again. The butterfly effect of kindness, he offered. Never underestimate the power of being real in a world of performances. And as the studio lights dimmed and the audience filed out, conversations hummed with reflection rather than celebrity gossip. People spoke in hushed tones about their own moments of rescue, times when a stranger's kindness or a friend's well-timed words had pulled them back from their own edges. Phone numbers were exchanged, not to share star sightings but to continue conversations about meaning and purpose and connection. The impact of that day extended far beyond ratings or social media buzz. In the weeks that followed, Steve Harvey's foundation reported record donations. Keanu's private charitable endeavors, which he had kept hidden for decades, inspired thousands to start their own quiet revolutions of kindness. Have you ever heard a sentence that saved you, or helped you save someone? Comment 1 if it happened to you. Comment 2 if you hope to be that light for someone else. Or maybe, like Steve, you once said something and never knew it saved someone's life. We want to hear your story. Has anyone ever spoken words that arrived at exactly the right time in your life? Type "grateful" in the comments if you've ever been saved by words that arrived at the right time. Leave your answer below. And if this story touched you, pass it on, because someone out there may be one sentence away from hope. You don't need a spotlight to make a difference. Sometimes, a whisper saves a life. Subscribe to Motivation for Success, where stories remind us that quiet voices can carry the loudest truths.